So it's good to see you, Jason Groh of Petit Films. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, Jillian. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me, did you start out wanting to do weddings?
That's a really good question. So my background, I have a storied background that goes on for probably about a good like 5 years before I really started doing this. So I no, I did not start out, wanting to do weddings. In fact, I started out as an actor. I was working professionally for a while. I was about 20 at the time. I'm 43 now. Back then I was 20, 22, but I'd get cast playing 16-year-olds all the time. And I was working professionally. I did some on-camera stuff, a lot of stage stuff. And I was also working behind the scenes as well. I was, just kind of taking any job I possibly could get. And during that time, I had met up with a couple of friends that were starting a company, and they wanted to, and I was tooling around and editing just on the side, just for, kind of like a hobby. And they brought me in, seeing if I wanted to be an editor with them. And so that's how I got going. But like a lot of companies, that thing went belly up in about a year. And so but having worked for them, I had developed these skills, and then I had an agent that I was being represented by, and she had an agency, and they were looking to put together. Back then, it was CD-ROMs, because the internet isn't at all what it is today back then, and so a lot of the stuff was put on like CDs, and then she was trying to find a way to get her talent out and have a little video tied into that. So she knew that I did this kind of work. She asked to see it, and and they ended up bringing me on to do that project. And in the midst of that, I formed a company in order to be able to do that project. I got tired of playing kids. I ended up going back to school, a little bit older, and once again, I wasn't going to do this. I actually was going to be an attorney. My degree was political theory, pre-law, but I had this company still going because I had it, before I went back to school. So I still had the company. I was, uh, making money, earning, doing that while I was going to college. And during that time, I went to DePaul University, and during that time at DePaul, they were starting a digital cinema company, digital cinema program, and I essentially, I was going to minor in that, and then major in political theory, and then go on to law school. And and but the courses I was taking, like, they seemed kind of, I definitely learned something in there, but they seemed a little basic, and I had to kind of start at the very beginning in order to finish this minor. And I'll never forget, I had a cinematography professor, and he was like, look, he's like, you've been doing this longer, before you even like came here, maybe you should just get done with your degree, forget about the minor, because the minor was going to keep me there for like another few months. And he's like, just, finish up your degree, get out of here, go on to law school, or maybe do this, if you want. But I was an older student. I was married, and we found out that we were having a baby, and another 3 years of law school didn't seem like it really was in the cards for me. It was going to be very difficult for us to be able to manage that. So I decided to, go all in on the company and build it up. And that's how I started doing production work. Now, that's not how I started doing weddings. The wedding aspect of it took shape over the course of probably about 5 years. I mean, weddings was a part of what we did, but it wasn't the only thing at the time of what we did. We were involved in a lot of different types of production work, and this is kind of in the mid 2000s. And we did everything from, we'd be contracted out to work with various networks. If they were short a camera crew, they'd hire my company, and they'd have us come out. So we did some work for NBC, a lot of these like morning show type shows, which were a lot of fun. We'd go to like, the aquarium and do stuff with dolphins, or we'd go to, a new restaurant would pop up. We'd go and interview the owner of the restaurant or whatnot. And, it's kind of like a lot of these around town segments. Then one of the hosts on that ended up starting at the time, which was a sports network. And they needed somebody they had a company they were working with. They didn't like the company, and they wanted to bring on somebody young and new, and, can maybe give them some new ideas. and go in that direction. And he asked me if I, how many people I had on my team. And it was pretty small. There was just a couple of us really working at the time. And he said, well, he's like, we're doing pregame, postgame for, this was all in Chicago. So pregame, postgame for the Cubs and the Sox and the Blackhawks and the Bulls. And we're doing, and I want you to produce original content with Bears players and, so it was a lot of it was working around sports. And he's like, do you think you'd be interested in this? And of course, my go-to answer was absolutely. I mean, that's, that would be what would be, awesome to do. But I didn't really have the team in place to do it. So the company started getting kind of built out during that time because I needed to bring on more camera people to handle this, the sports work, because I couldn't be at these stadiums every night and, or in the locker rooms every morning. And, and so I brought on some people, and then in turn, we were still doing weddings during this time too, but it was like, the wedding aspect of it was probably 25% or maybe 30% of what we were doing. And, the job was great. I, got to interview celebrities. We had, I was working, the Super Bowl. I got to know a lot of, prominent players' families and all this kind of stuff. And then 2008 happened. And if anybody knows what happens in 2008, the economy went down the drain, and so did that company. They were only about, it was an amazing, amazing job. I mean, all the accolades you could possibly want, they were there. And, but unfortunately they just ran out of money, and they couldn't keep it up. They couldn't continue to do what they were doing. And, we ended up moving out of the office, and, that was that. And then after that, we were still doing weddings. Now, during this time, because that company had gone belly up, I started focusing maybe a little bit more into weddings, because our company was still around. And we, the weddings seemed to kind of support us as we were kind of moving through these transitions of the economy. And as, we would go from doing, television work to sports work, we would still continue to do weddings. And that business was consistent, that side of it. But again, I thought, well, maybe I'll look at the sports stuff a little bit more and, see if I can leverage some of my contacts for, to maybe continue on in sports. And I kind of ended up becoming like this de facto guy who would produce work for athletes that were leaving the NFL who didn't really know what they wanted to do with their life. So it was a lot of like podcasts and live streams and all this kind of stuff. And then I came up with an idea where, you know what? Why don't we do an Inside the Actors studio at a live venue where we bring the athletes on, we sit down, we interview them, we'll have like a live band, but it'll be about kind of a more in-depth thing about life and kind of their journey of how they got to point A to point B. That originally started out as an online show, but after interviewing one of the guys who played for the Bears, he was like, hey, do you ever think about bringing this to maybe a live venue and doing this for television? He's like, you have a following. And plus, a lot of the players wanted to watch the players. So what we found is a lot of our audience was actually other players, other athletes, they wanted to see what the other guy would say. So we moved it to, I originally wanted the House of Blues in Chicago. We didn't get it. So we took it over to Hard Rock Cafe, which we were able to get. And we had the show running there, and I pitched NBC. They picked us up for a season. And it was great. But once again, the economy was tanking again. So it was kind of like, we had this kind of thing where it looked like, when the financial crisis happened, a lot of companies went belly up, but then it kind of looked like it was going to start to come back, and then it didn't. And during that time, NBC was quick to pick something up because it wasn't going to cost them a whole lot, but we had to do a lot of our own advertising, and the advertising dollars just were not there during that time. And media was consolidating like crazy. And it just, they ran us for one season, and that was kind of about it. So here we were once again, having gone through this journey about the first 5 years or so of this company, where weddings were, probably 25 to 30%, but increasingly becoming more and more, because even as these other aspects of the company would kind of maybe not pan out because of the economic times we were in, the wedding stuff stayed really consistent. So moving out of that, I thought, well, why don't we do weddings? Because the thing is that we've got, a stronghold here in the wedding industry locally. And, and this area of our company is doing really well. And these, and so why not just put all of our chips in one basket and just focus on that? And that was probably about, I'd say 12 or 13 years ago. And so that's exactly what we did. We got rid of all the other stuff that we were doing. We just focused, and we focused on weddings and focused on events, and just built the company up from that time into, what we know it to be today.
And within that 12 or 13 years, how do you think the industry has changed?
It's changed quite a bit. So what initially got us into weddings in the first place, even though it was kind of like a subcategory of what we were doing, was the fact that it was such a cheesy industry. In the early 2000s, or early to mid 2000s, it was a lot of like really old guys with really huge cameras and these lights that would give you an instant migraine once they were turned on. Like, it was just, it was brutal. And I remember going to, because when you're getting into an industry, like, you want to learn from those who are around you, right? You want to learn from those who are really good and become just as good, if not better. And I never forget going to an association meeting out here, which was supposed to be like some of the best of the best. And this stuff was so cheesy that they were presenting. Like, I'll never forget, somebody put their work up and they had something where they were doing like this thing. These love stories were really big back in like the early 2000s. And I'll never forget, like, somebody had this thing where it was like a couple, they were like in the woods walking around, and then like the guy jumped out of the tree and proposed, and the whole thing. And there was like this little chime sound effect that happened as like it was so cheesy, Jillian. Like, I sat there and I was like, and this guy was like, and these guys booked. I mean, they were constantly busy. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, is this really the kind of work that I'm supposed to be doing? And from that moment, I never went to a conference. I have never been to one. We're one of the biggest players in the game. I've never been to one of these conferences before. And you know what? And I'm not saying that, look, I mean, there's something to be said for networking. There's something to be said for meeting up with people. And I'm sure it's changed over the years. I mean, this is a long, long time ago. With that said, like, this was ridiculous. And we found that, and as I got talking to these guys, like, as I would look around, like, I would notice that they all just kind of copied off of each other. So there was no originality. Nobody was doing anything that really was all that interesting. And so I thought, you know what? Why don't we flip the script on this? Why don't we come in and do because I was always I've always been a movie guy. Like, I love films. I analyze films. Like, I am a big film nerd, right? I grew up, my parents, my mom and dad, they ran a company, a real mom and pop thing. And to get away on the weekends, we always went to the movies. Every weekend we saw a movie. And I was one of these guys who had this encyclopedia of ridiculous movie knowledge, because that's what we did. That was the way we got out of the house. That was the way my parents could just, unwind from work and not have to think about anything, was going to the movies. So, and I went to all of them. And so I was a real movie nerd. And then, throughout, when I was in high school, I worked at Blockbuster Video, and, so for me, like, film was such a big deal. And then the whole, theater side of it and acting side of it, that was a big part of it too. So so for me, like, I always loved a good trailer. Like, nothing built excitement than a trailer. And back then, people weren't really doing this. And I'm not going to say that we were the first ones to do this, but I don't know of anybody else, at least in our area, that did. And it really, kind of put us in a different category. And so my whole thing was that, like, hey, why don't we make trailers that build all this anticipation for someone's wedding, so that way when they watch the main film, they have something they can look forward to when they get to that point. And why not use music that drives that narrative? Why not find music that builds in crescendos, where certain moments, are exposed during these crescendos to build that emotion and build that excitement? And so that's really what we focused on. These trailers were almost presented like music videos, in the sense that, there was some, voiceover and narrative, and a little bit of narrative from, possibly vows or speeches that were done. But a lot of it was, it really built, into this moment. And we were successful with that. And so, but this is all before the economy tanked. There are kind of two different, I look at the last 20 years of this industry kind of as, you kind of have these two big moments. You have everything before 2008 and the kind of everything after 2008. And so before 2008, that's what it was. And also what was going on during that time is there was a shift to high definition. HD was becoming prevalent, but the problem was the early formats of HD, it was a mess when it came down to how these companies were rolling it out. You had HD DVDs, you had Blu-ray, you had all these different formats you could film in, and a lot of the editing systems um, didn't support some of this stuff, or you'd have to convert the footage. And why this is all important for those who are listening is because these companies didn't want to go into Blu-ray. They didn't want to go into HD. They wanted to stay in standard definition because they would have to change their entire workflow to do it. And I will tell you right now, I don't know of one of those companies that's still around today. Not one.
Wow.
We went, because we were kind of coming in during this shift, we were able to come in and just go straight to HD. We didn't have to worry about reconfiguring a workflow, going from standard definition to high definition. We went right into HD. But these companies, they didn't want to do it because it was going to mess everything up for them, and they didn't survive. Like I said, I don't know if it's directly related to that, but I know for a fact that I don't know. And in fact, one of the guys who was one of those companies ended up pulling some work with us. But then you had, and to answer your question on how it changes, then you had 2008. 2008 changed this industry like you wouldn't believe. First of all, wedding videography used to be about a $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, price point. I mean, people weren't going to pay that. You're looking at, a lot of these people were, struggling financially. The job market tanked. If people's parents were paying for that, all of a sudden their retirements were gone. They just didn't have the money that was there. So it created this economic shift. But what happened at almost exactly the same time is the barrier to entry came down. The cost of cameras came down. These big, massive cameras no longer existed. I mean, they did, but people weren't using them because what they found was that a simple Canon like Mark II or Mark III, something that your photographer would use, what happened is that those cameras started filming video. And once they realized they could put these amazing lenses on these cameras that cost about $2,000, as opposed to a camera that costs $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000, then it opened up, the opportunity for, number one, the cost to come down for a lot of these, for a lot of wedding videos and wedding films, and the barrier into entry was lower because you had a lot of people coming in that could afford, this type of equipment, because there's a big difference between a $3,000 investment to get you started or like a $8,000 investment. So a lot of people flooded the industry. The problem is that you had a lot of people flooding the industry, which brought the prices down. But what a lot of people don't understand in the wedding industry is that, filming the wedding, that's like, 40% of what you do. 60% of it is taking care of your clients, and 60% of it is managing, the natural anxiety that comes with weddings and understanding what that looks like for couples, and really understanding your client. So yes, you had a wave of people that came flooding in, but then you had a good drop off of probably about 70% of those that came in because they just couldn't handle it. They weren't used to dealing with, people, who have that type of anxiety, and be able to manage that type of, this type of business. Because this business is very different than just going out and filming whatever. You're filming a wedding. You got one shot to get it right. The client, has anxiety going into the wedding in general, and you need to understand how to work with that and how to, to kind of have that bedside manner. But that's how it's changed. So again, it's a very long answer to a short question, but essentially, you had these two kind of shifts in the last 20 years, but the big one was the drop in price for sure, and the type of the type of cameras that are used now, because the films look very different than they did 20 years ago.
Right. Now, with all of that, it sounds like that presented a lot of challenges. What do you say has been your biggest challenge, and how have you overcome it?
I'm going to say the biggest challenge has been COVID, by far. I mean, because the thing is that it was easy because when we came in, we were already, we jumped into Blu-ray right away. So, we didn't have to deal with having to do that switch like I was talking about earlier. Even when the economy tanked, we could adjust our rates in our packages to kind of match that, and to kind of, work that Rubik's Cube until you found what really worked during that time. COVID presented a whole nother set of challenges that actually were very challenging, but actually made the company a lot better in many, many ways, and which actually set us up to have the biggest year that we ever had in the company. And the issue with COVID wasn't so much, wasn't so much an economic collapse. The issue with COVID was how to manage, how to move forward in an economy where you can't have gatherings. That was huge. And then not only that, but be able to manage how you're going to do that in an economy where you not have gatherings, and how are you going to manage, the clients that you currently have booked? Are you going to allow them to reschedule? Are you going to allow them to cancel? How are you going to temper, their anxieties? Because not only is it difficult planning a wedding anyway. I mean, I don't even care. I mean, I don't care if you have a coordinator or not. You still have to do some work, in order to plan your wedding. And it's difficult enough as it is, and there's enough anxiety wrapped around that as it is. But now you're presented with the fact that, oh my gosh, this entire country is shut down. The early days of COVID, I'll be honest with you, we didn't know where we were going to go. We didn't know how to move forward, but what we did that I think really helped us and really, really worked is that rather than try to rely upon throwing enough stuff to the wall and see what stuck, which, we kind of did that, I'll be honest with you. But really what we did that was effective was turning to our clients and asking what they want. That was huge, because going to without knowing from the other side of it, really what it looks like, which is assuming and having presumptions about what it might look like, it was a lot easier just to go straight to the client and say, hey, what do you want? What can we do to make this process better? And if you're on the other side of this, what can we do to help, keep this business going? And they came back, they said it, cancellations. We want to be able to cancel and get a full refund. We want to be able to reschedule without having fees. We'd like to have a live streaming option if you can do it. And I was like, hey, let's do it. It gave us an opportunity, because everything was shut down. The beautiful thing about what happened and why this worked out, well for the company, is that we had to shut down. Oh, the big one too was monthly payments. So the thing is that we had a shutdown that happened over the course of 3 months. We were able, we always wanted to move to a monthly payment system where the client wasn't forced to pay a massive chunk up front. This was big. And so so the thing is that, but it was hard to do that because, for cash flow and things like that, like when you're kind of in a system, it's hard to completely shift out of that system without it having it heavily affect your cash flow. But because we had 3 months where we had nothing going on, no shoots, no nothing, we actually were able to, and the cash flow in a way was kind of shut down. We were able to rework the entire system and flip it. And so we were able to create a payment process. We were able to, create a system where, you can reschedule and you can cancel and it's not a big deal. You're going to get your money back. And it helped us. It allowed people to come in with a strength of being like, hey, let's book with them. But we know that if we can't do this, they're not gonna take our money. And this is during a time when venues were not being flexible, or they were only being flexible up to a point, and people were losing massive deposits. I mean, our deposits aren't that big, but with these venues, they're losing massive deposits. And it also focused us to, change things that we've always been wanting to change, and to find those little, because every company has them. Every company has those little cracks, those little things that you're constantly trying to fix. And you'll always have something. I mean, any company you work in, that there's always something where you're like, oh gosh, I wish we did this better. I wish that department did this better, or whatever. No company is exempt from that, right? So it allowed us really to focus on, hey, what do we want to fix? What can we work on to really make this, an elite company, to really just push us over to that and get us to that next level? And we were. And there were things, there were little things that we always wanted to fix that we got a chance to fix and work on. And then it also allowed us to look internally as well. We've never really been big about chasing clients. Anybody can do that. You can chase and chase and chase all you want. But we never really had the time to really develop our internal, I don't say referral, but internal, just kind of, talking to our clients a little bit more, finding about what they loved about our company, finding about maybe some things that they would think would make the company better, and really, listening to them and developing programs that, that get them more involved beyond the wedding film. I mean, sure. I mean, you want to have a great wedding film? Great. Come to us. We'll create a fantastic wedding film for you. But if you want to do a little bit more, if you want to, be involved in contests where you can get your wedding film for free, if you want to, participate and just do a little bit more fun stuff or be a part of a real community, well, that's really what we're building. And it gave us the opportunity to do that. So yes, the beginning of COVID was very, very scary in the sense that, wow, we've never seen anything quite like this. We've seen economic shifts, but nothing that looks like this. But I find that through those challenges, you really learn and you really progress because you're forced to. And I believe that we really did.
Now, whether it be through COVID or the grand scheme that you've been doing this, what is the thing that you've learned the most?
The thing that I think that we have learned the most in this company, well, that's a good question. What have we learned the most? I think it's not a matter of learning it. I've always known it, but I think that you're reminded again and again that the client is the thing. The couple is the thing, right? I mean, like I said, our programs that we have now, we didn't have those going, a year ago, but we wanted to turn inward and really focus on that client and that couple. The thing that I've also, I think the thing that I've learned the most is that, I keep this Rubik's Cube on my desk right here. And I keep it on my desk to remind myself that no matter how many times you spin this thing and no matter how many times you work it and you get this to right where you want it to be and you solve the Rubik's Cube, you mess it all up and you just start over again. And that is the metaphor for running a company. Because, the minute that you think you have it solved is the minute that you're going to become complacent and the minute that you're going to just, probably start going under and going in the wrong direction because you've got to keep, it's the challenge of running a company. You've got to keep moving to that next level. You got to do the basics really, really well, really well. But then at the same time, you've got to be able to push forward. And it's not easy. I mean, it's one of these things where to do it the right way, it's all about the couple. It's all about the client. And whether I agree, in some cases or not, if I look at a film, I'm like, this is a fantastic film, one of the best that we have. And I have a client come back and go, I like the film, but I got to tell you, these 2 or 3 shots, I just don't care for them. And I'll sit there and be like, okay, I'm not at all. I mean, at the end of the day, it is their film, and I don't care. It doesn't matter what I think. It really doesn't. It matters what the couples think, so I'm beholden, the way that I run this company and the way that we do this as a team is that we're beholden to the couples, but I think the thing I've learned the most is that the couple is the thing. The current client that you have is the thing. And again, it's not that I didn't know that. I mean, I've always wanted to take care of our couples, but I think that just with COVID and just, having that sense of, hey, we're kind of, because one of the things I started doing with these like weekly webinars, especially during the heavier days of COVID, I've kind of moved away from it a little bit now because, there's not as much to talk about with regards to COVID and rescheduling and all that as we did in the early days. But I still do webinars at least once a month with our clients, our current clients. And I think that, it's one of these things where, I would hold these once a month webinars and it was almost like a, I don't want to say it was a venting fest, but I think, I think that we all, I got to hear the concerns, that people had, going into the year, and not everybody would be on it, probably just, 20% of our clients. But with that said, and then we'd record them and other people could watch them. But yeah, I mean, just focus on the client, stay focused, listen to the clients, things that I should have done years ago that I'm doing now. Like we have a feedback thing, and they can just click feedback at petit4films.com and just drop us a line. And, and I call it help make our company better. Please help us make it better. We can only see what we can see on the side of it. We cannot see the other side of this company, so please, be a part of this. We rely upon our clients to help make this company a better company. And yeah, we have our ideas and all that too, but we really do focus and we really do listen to them. So really just, staying in tune with the couples and the clients, that will always help you and never steer you the wrong way.
That's great. And that's so important too. So what would you say is the one thing that people do not know about you?
Well, I think the theater thing was one that I think people might surprise some people, but
Yeah, I like how you were cast as a child consistently. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like I was playing 21 and, I think I was in Bye Bye Birdie, like I don't even know how many times. Um, I was like, I think that's what changed it actually was that I think I had another audition for Bye Bye Birdie and I was like, I'm not doing it. I'm like, I'm out of here. There's only so many times I can do this show. But a couple of things. One is I'm a pilot. I hold a commercial license, which for me, aviation is a big part of my life. It was something that I always wanted to do since I was a kid. I was one of these kids. I was an 80s kid. So like for me, I grew up in the 80s. So for me, I'd watch Double Dare on Nickelodeon and see the commercials for Space Camp and always want to go. My dad took me to go see we didn't have a lot of money growing up. I came from a very, modest family. But one thing that he did is, we did a trip to my uncle lived in Florida and we went down there and, he took me to Cape Canaveral to watch the space shuttle take off. And I was like 6 or 7 years old. And I remember being on his shoulder and watching the thing take off. And, and I just always had a love of flying and aviation. And every time we got into a plane, like I always wanted to, this is before 9/11 and all that, where you could, they were a little bit more liberal about letting kids look around the cockpit. And when I was a little kid, like, I always wanted to check out the cockpit and I almost, went into the Air Force. But, chose not to go in that direction, but flying was always there. And, and so but it takes time and it takes money and, I had little kids, but, once they kind of started getting a little bit older and I had a little bit more time, I thought I'd give it a shot, and so I'll never forget to do my first flight in a small plane. And I remember the first time I did that, I was so like, I'm like, what if I don't like this? Like, I've been wanting to do this my entire life. And what if, I just went on one of those little introductory flights and I was like, what if I don't like this? And fortunately I loved it. And it just went from there. And I, did my private pilot's rating and then just kept adding ratings. And, I find that it transfers over really well. I find it transfers over to, you have to learn a lot about emergencies, emergency procedures, major ones like engine fires, electrical failures, engine outs, all this kind of stuff and how to handle those types of things. And I find that it translates into business really well, especially with what we do, because, especially working with clients and just, and really just, keeping that sense of just calmness, no matter what, no matter what you're doing and even just in life, but having that, I'll never forget, when you're up in the air, you get an emergency thrown at you, one of the things that the instructors say to you is, just the airplane's not going to fall out of the sky, just take a sip of coffee and, and and then do what you're going to do. And I think that's a great, a great little, thing to say because, in business, we all deal with it, things pop up and, you can react immediately and, and throw yourself into a situation, that, you, whether it's an email that you maybe shouldn't send or maybe, whatever it may be, or you take a minute, analyze what's going on and decide how you're going to approach the situation. And so I find that actually it's transferred over. And Jillian, it's just a lot of fun. I mean, I have a spin I'm in the middle of one of the things I'm working on. I've had to take a break during COVID because of, being in a small area with other people, but is my instructor rating. And one of the things that we have to do is spin recovery. So I'll never forget one of the most fun flights I had was going up in the small airplane where we just put it into a number of different types of spins. And you got to put the airplane into a spin. You got to take it out of a spin. And then we just barrel rolled the airplane, flew it upside down and did all this crazy fun stuff and wore a parachute, because because the FAA requires if you're going to do all that kind of, it was aerobatic type stuff, you have to have a parachute and, it was just, an amazing amount of fun, just, having the opportunity to do that. Now, you don't do these, that part's not for fun. You're doing it in case a student puts an airplane into a spin that way, how to get out of it. So you don't, end up killing yourself, but that's why you do that. But, going through that type of stuff is a blast. And I love flying. I love aviation. Like I said, I feel as though it transfers very well to what I do. And I hope to, be able to have the chance to do it, the rest of my life or as long as I possibly can. The other part of it, I think that people don't know is that I'm a total nerd. I am like, Star Wars, like you just, I mean, it's, you know, it's pretty bad. You know, I'm a big Star Wars junkie. I grew up on Star Wars. It's been, you know, a part of my life, I think, you know, throughout, and, you know, I'd say probably that. And, you know, I also enjoy, I'm a big movie nerd too. Like I enjoy movies. I enjoy film. I enjoy the analysis of film. I love, you know, I love like film history, and I love, like, you know, the messaging in film, and just, you know, I'm just a big like arts junkie. Theater, I love theater too, you know. So when it comes down to theater and film and, you know, all that kind of stuff, yeah, I'm a total nerd, and I geek out on that, you know, every once in a while. So
Well, that is perfect for your industry, because I
yeah,
always feel like weddings are the production of a lifetime, you know?
yes,
So you definitely want somebody on the other end that understands that.
yeah,
And speaking of that end, where do you see Petit Four Films in 5 years?
5 years. Wow, it's so the 5 year gap is always interesting to me, because 5 years ago this company looked a lot different than it does now, and 5 years before that it looked way different than it does now. 5 years from now, I don't know. You know, I love conversing with our couples. I love conversing with our clients. Um, I love them. You know, I love the fact that these people have come to us, and they've, you know, they've put their memories in our hands. Excuse me, and they put their memories in our hands. Um, you know, I want to build an experience unlike any other. That's where I'm trying to get to. That's where I'm trying to go. Now, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know exactly what that looks like 5 years from now, but I want it to be something more than you come to than just to get a wedding video. What we need to do really, really well. But with that said, you know, I think, you know, focusing on just a couple of things, because you can do you can go in a million different directions. The problem is, if you do that, you're not going to do a lot of them very well. You have to kind of narrow that focus down to what works. And sometimes it is starting something and then realizing, maybe this isn't exactly what we want to be doing. But sometimes that something shapes into something else too. But I think that really just creating an experience for our couples that is dynamic and, you know, none other. Like, I don't feel like we have to do like everything in this industry. I think that, you know, branching out into photography, doing things like that, you know, can definitely be beneficial, especially with what we do. I think the combination, you know, and we've recently partnered up with a company which we're working with them on, and, you know, and we're doing photography through them. But you know, and I think that that's interesting. But I think just focusing on that experience. What does that experience look like? You know, and just sticking with that, and making the couple the center point of everything that we do, not only just when it comes down to, not only just when it comes down to, you know, the film itself and delivering an exceptional product, but also in, you know, making them a part of everything. Suggestions, like I said, suggestions, feedback. You know, right now we have a game show going. You know, how long we'll continue with that, I don't know, but you know, that's going at the moment. And you know, and just finding fun ways for, you know, people to become involved in the company as much as they possibly want to be, and be rewarded for that experience. So that's it, really, just building that experience out, and making it, and focusing on that experience aspect, and you know, and really just doing that. And in 5 years from now, you know, we see something that's shaped, where, you know, yes, you have the film, but now you have this entire, you know, thing that you can enter that goes beyond just the film itself.
That's amazing. Well, Jason, thank you so much for answering my questions today. And I'm excited to see everything that Petit Fours Films has in store. So
Thanks,
thank you
Jillian.
so much.
Yeah, thank you. This has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you taking the time to do this, and I'll see you soon. Have a good day.
You too.